When you're ready, bring the hands into prayer pose. Stretch up tall. You know how to do it from the bottom of the spine. Go inside with your mind and make the spine tall, 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 tall. One vertebrae on top of the other, stacked all the way up, and begin to take long, deep breath. Open up the chest. Let the shoulders come back and down. And just take 2 minutes to just get a hold of yourself. Let the eyes close down and roll up and focus at the brow. Let the breathing become deep and seamless and slow. Let the lips part a little so the jaw is relaxed. Inhale deep. Exhale all the air out. Inhale deep again. All the air out. Navel to the spine. Inhale to begin. Tune in. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Adgure Name Jagadgure Name Sadgure Name Shri Gurudev Name. Adgure Name Sadgure Name Shri Gurudev Name. Adgure Name Jugadgure Name Sadgure Name Shri Gurudev Name. Inhale deep. Exhale, relax. Good. We're just going to start with a couple short meditations, and then I want to have a little teaching moment with you guys about some science, about how we can really shape shift ourselves, how we can shift the shape of our internal being, of our brain, and of our DNA. It's transcendental physiology is what I like to call it, and I just want to share with you guys some of the latest research behind it. I'm just trying to find my clock here. Okay, so sit cross-legged. We're going to just breathe through the left nostril here. So close the right nostril. We're going to inhale deep and we're going to hold the breath for a pretty long time. I'll keep track of the time and let you know when. And when we exhale, we're going to exhale out the right nostril in 4 equal segments. So it'll look like a long, deep breath in through the left nostril. We'll hold it, and then we'll exhale through the right nostril only in 4 equal segments. just like that. Okay? So get comfortable. Close the eyes down and focus at the brow. Left hand in Gyan Mudra. Inhale deep and fill up the lungs and hold it. Apply the root lock and focus at the brow. And when you're ready, exhale out the right nostril, 4 equal segments. Inhale deep, left nostril, and hold. Exhale right, 4 equal segments. Inhale left and hold. Exhale, 4 equal segments. Last time, inhale deep and hold. Exhale, 4 equal segments out the right. Now this time, inhale and hold. And when we exhale, it will be 8. Exhale out in 8 equal segments. Inhale deep and hold. Exhale out 8 equal segments. Inhale deep and hold. Exhale out 8 equal segments. Inhale, hold. Exhale out at 8 equal segments. Almost done. A few minutes to go. Inhale and hold. Exhale out 8 equal segments. Inhale and hold. Exhale out 8 equal segments. Inhale and hold. Last 2 minutes. Exhale out 8 equal segments. Last minute. And exhale out at 8 equal segments. Good. And relax. Yeah. Okay. Good. So that was good. Good work, guys. Let's get our breath down to 1 breath per minute for about 10 minutes. So that's a pretty good deep practice. And if you notice, it start to turn you on to start to relax, make you receptive to relaxing. Now, I'm going to share some pages with you. I want to share with you the notes from a workshop that I did about the physiology of yoga. So you can just chill if you want and take some notes or just listen. And I'm just going to go kind of slow. I might repeat myself because this stuff is a little bit scientific. And for those of you journaling, I want to make sure that you understand the basic concepts. This first thing I just want to show you is this is just an article about DNA. It's from the National Library of Medicine. There's not much here in this paragraph that's important except the whoops, sorry, just a second. There. I think it paused for a minute. Now what I want to show you guys is just this last sentence here. They're talking about what they know about DNA and how they think it works. And in this last part of the paragraph, they say, as we witness an explosion of knowledge in the field of epigenetics, and for those of you who are not familiar with the term epigenetics, this means things that affect our genes and affect our DNA that are not inherent in the DNA itself. So this would be outside influences. So again, they're saying, as we witness an explosion of knowledge in the field of epigenetics, we are forced to revisit our dogma. And what they're saying is they're forced to revisit the way that they perceive how DNA works. And they came to that conclusion because there's been a lot of studies in the last decade or so that show that our DNA is not just in control of itself, that actually everything, not just many things, but everything affects our DNA. From our environment to the food that we eat, so on and so forth. Now this next thing I want to share with you is the notes to my workshop that I was talking about. And it'll be up here just one second. Okay. It's a workshop I did on the physiology of yoga. Now listen closely. Modern medicine is coming to a place where mind meets body and mind meets DNA. So what I'm saying is that medicine is coming to the point where we're going to start using our body and our mind as medicine, where we can control our genes from the inside of our body, okay? Now, the interesting thing about this is that this is happening in medicine, and it is also what is in the description of the ancient scriptures of what yoga is the mind and the body connection. The old idea of how DNA worked was that it was fixed. And what you'll see in these charts that I'm going to show you is that there's a lot of new research that shows that it's not, and that we can control this ourselves. So just to give you an idea of medicine, the first medicine that we had was what's referred to as surgery medicine, and that's when you work on the body in a mechanical nature. You know, surgeries, you try to fix the physical, mechanical aspects of the body. And then we graduated as we gained some wisdom and understanding to pharmacological medicine, where we tried to change the components and the cellular receptors by giving medicine. And then we got deeper with that medicine to what's called molecular medicine, where we could manipulate the molecules on a protein level And then we came to modern genomic medicine, which tries to understand the code of your DNA and tries to kind of go back to the old school way of thinking and mechanically alter your DNAs to get rid of things that aren't wanted and to promote, more desirable DNA. But now what we're coming to, that we're all part of and witnessing and actually practicing, is this new medicine, which is quantum medicine. And it's the idea that electromagnetic fields work on the most base levels of nature, which is our molecular structure. And science is coming to understand that we can dictate the structure, our molecular structure, based on our electromagnetic fields. Now, that's all interesting because what we're doing here with the yoga and the meditation practice is we're working on our electromagnetic field, like we did yesterday with this, and a lot of you commented and DM'd me and stuff that they really felt this and is building the magnetic field and the aura here. That's what this medicine is talking about in regards to electromagnetic field. So the basic idea of meditation is when you start to meditate, you're at an active level of thinking. And then slowly you experience a more quiet, more refined level of thinking. And each one of these states of thinking, whether it's the excited level or the more quiet level, they correspond to states of excitation in your physiology. So how your thinking is a direct indicator of how your physiology is. Basic concept of meditation. Until a person is able to transcend that excited state of mind and body, you can't get out of disorder, because it's only when you transcend that excited state, that busyness of mind, that the quiet comes. And when the quiet comes, that's when the transcending happens. And when the transcending happens, we experience orderliness, and we create orderliness in our subconscious, in our conscious, in our body, and in our environment. So all of this order and everything that we're looking for, that we're seeking for in our life, for things to be just as so the way that we like them, that really comes from exercising the mind and thinking and practicing meditation and learning how to quiet the mind. That's when the internal and external order will present itself. Again, basic concepts of meditation. Please take notes. Now, all that is leading up to this new understanding of how your DNA lives and expresses itself. And what we know now is that the first thing that has an impact on your DNA and your physiology is actually the physiology of the society that you live in. So if you just think about all the terms you're familiar with in your society, the concepts, the cultures, what you see on the news, all these things we hear every day, especially in America. In American media, you listen to Fox News or CNN, you hear all these terms, insurrection every day and domestic terrorism and these kinds of things. These all have an impact on your physiology. And then after the impact of society is your own individual physiology, which starts with the organism of the body itself and then goes into the different systems, the hormone system, the nervous system, the digestive system, etc., to your tissues, your cells, and down to your protein, and then down all the way down to the DNA level. So that's how your DNA develops its character, is through all of these different influences. Now, this is what's called the central dogma of molecular biology. And what they mean by that is it's the central basic thought or basic premise or concept of how DNA expresses itself, how we understand that. And this is basically what we've thought since about 1958 or something, late 50s, when this was discovered. And it starts with your DNA you see at the top that has all of the information that it needs in it to make the proteins, because that's what DNA basically is it's a protein factory that makes little proteins that go out into your body and affect your system. So the top part is the DNA, and that has all the information in it. And then that information gets transcribed by a little messenger called RNA, and then that gets sent over to the ribosome, which is like a protein factory, and releases the proteins into the body. And since 1958 something, that's how we thought DNA worked until just maybe the last 10 years. So this is very new science. We were doing yoga long before this because we didn't need the science. We could feel it within ourselves, but it's really cool to see it being studied now. Now this is what your DNA looks like. It's a double helix. It lines like this, okay? And you'll see in the middle this blue circle. This is important to know. It's a protein. It's called a histone. And this protein, it enables the DNA to unwind and open itself up. And when it does, that's when the character of that DNA expresses itself and distributes itself through your body. There's one other thing, that this is called a regulator. And what they mean by that is it has the ability to open or close the DNA. So the histone is a DNA regulator, a protein regulator. The other thing we want to know is right next to it is a molecule. I'm not a biologist. I can't remember exactly how to pronounce this name. But the important thing to know is there's two things, a molecule and a protein, that are actually able to be affected by our yoga practice. So there's different, DNA. There's good DNA and there's bad DNA. And depending on that thinking that I was talking about, where that thinking is, if it's in an excited state or if it's in a calm state, this is what's affecting how that protein and how that molecule is allowing the DNA to express itself. Okay, I know it's a little bit, it's a lot. I'm just going to read this to you again so you can think about it again. DNA contains all the information in your physiology. And the information that's in your DNA, it's transcribed by the RNA. So it goes from DNA, and then it gets transcribed into a message, into the RNA. The RNA has molecules that leave the cell nucleus of the RNA and go out to other portions of the cell, and they carry that information of the DNA that they were given to what's called the ribosomes. And in the ribosome, that's a protein factory, and it makes the proteins dictated by the DNA. So the DNA says, this is what's up. The RNA says, right, I got you. And the ribosomes say, cool, I'll make the proteins. This is important stuff, because all of the diseases that we experience in life are related to this and related to our thinking. So, these are some of the things that trigger those mechanisms in the DNA, the protein and the molecule that allow the DNA to open and close. These are the things that trigger whether they open or close. How you develop in the womb, the amount of love that you experience early and later in your life, the amount of chemicals in your food and your environment, the drugs that you take, the food that you eat, how you age, if you have a lot of stress in your life or not, your regular behavior, and your thoughts. These are all things that determine how the DNA expresses itself. Now, this is a study um, about some cancer patients. There are 30 men with prostate cancer, and they were given a meditation regime to do, and also in conjunction with diet and exercise. And this shows here, this bottom one here where this arrow is, this is the good healthy DNA that fights cancer. And it went up. And this RNA, this is a mutated DNA that's causing the cancer, went down. And this is from, the important thing to notice is this is from external changes. These are not things inherent in the DNA information. This is information that's put into the DNA through food, through exercise, through supplements, through meditation. Okay? So it says here, showed increased expression of healthy DNA and decreased expression of dangerous DNA as a result of radical lifestyle changes. Now this thing here, this is a picture of your DNA. And these little yellow dots here, these are little caps on the DNA. And you can think of them like the caps on your shoelace. They keep the DNA from becoming frayed. And I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce them. I've heard it pronounced telomere and also telomere, but the pronunciation isn't so important. What's important is to understand as we get older, this telomere or telomere, it becomes shorter and shorter and shorter, so the DNA becomes frayed. And you can see here, it declines pretty rapidly. By the time you're 35, it's here. By the time you're 65, they're really short. And that's what's protecting your DNA. So here was a 5-year study of people that practice transcendental meditation. And it was given to heart disease patients. And the people that practice meditation, they showed a 48% reduction in the rate of strokes and heart attacks that caused death compared to the people that did it. And here you can see reduced risk for death, heart attack, and stroke with the Transcendental Meditation Program, lowered by 48%. I just got to close my window here for a minute. Excuse me, it's freezing. Freezing cold in Chicago. So that's when you're talking about, percentages, 48%, that's a big number, And these are people that are at risk of dying of heart attack and stroke. Now, this is a graph showing how meditation can regrow the telomere or regrow the caps that are on the DNA. Okay, there's 45 people randomly assigned to practice either simply meditation. So one group practiced meditation, and another group practiced extensive lifestyle changes, and that means like diet and exercise. And all these people had high blood pressure, and they were all measured for how long their telomeres were before they started. And then they meditated for 16 weeks. Well, one group meditated for 16 weeks, and the other group did their exercise and their diet thing. So on the right-hand side of this graph, you'll see the modification group. This is the group that did the meditation here in blue. Or I'm sorry, this is the blue is the group that did the physical activity and the diet. And the red one that's a little bit higher, this is the group that did transcendental meditation. And what they're showing is that both groups increased the length of those caps on their DNA. But the group that did meditation, it's curious to see
It's just a little bit more. And also, they didn't change their diet or adopt any exercise. They just performed meditation. So that's big news. Effects of transcendental meditation versus health education on gene expression for the telomerase. So before, when I showed you that diagram of the old way we thought about how DNA works, this is the new way that we see how DNA actually works. They call it the new paradigm. So it's the environmental signal is the primary cause of your DNA. You should write that down so you really understand that. The environmental signal is the primary cause of how the DNA is expressing itself. And then it goes to the regulatory protein, which is the one that I showed you, the little blue circle. That's the protein that turns the DNA on or off. So it's our environment that's signaling that protein whether it should turn on or off. And then it goes down to the chain I talked about before, to the DNA with all of its information, transcribing it to the RNA, then creating the protein. So before the DNA can even do its thing, first is the environmental signal, and then whether that protein in that molecule responds to the environmental signal and turns itself on or off. So see, when we're in a long sustained state of stress and trauma, and the environmental signal is giving us trauma and putting us in a fear state, in a reactionary, heightened arousal state all the time, eventually the DNA starts to get mutated and starts to kill itself and expresses things like cancer and heart disease, and the body starts to eat itself. But that's really because the environment is eating us first. So that's why it's so valuable to have a meditation practice, because most of us in the world, we cannot control the environment that we're in all the time. So the one thing that we can control is our mind, and that's why we practice the meditation. We practice the meditation to keep our DNA cool, to keep our head cool. Now this Kirtan Kriya I taught with us 2 nights ago. It's the one we did with the fingers like this, and we chanted Sadanama. There's some really great information about that meditation. Out of all the meditations studied so far, that meditation had the greatest increase in the length of the telomerase, the largest increase out of any of the meditations. It says Kirtan Kriya 12 minutes a day. It's only 12 minutes for 8 weeks every day. What it did, it increased the enzyme that grows the telomere, and then the telomere grows from that enzyme. And it increased it by over 43%, over what transcendental meditation does. Now, I'm not going to say that I know why, but I'm going to tell you what I think intuitively, why it's so powerful. It's because you're using more aspects of the human being, because you're breathing and you're touching the fingertips, and you're also creating the vision in your mind of Sa, the cosmos, Da, life, Na, death, Ma, rebirth. And as you generate those visions in your mind's eye, and you touch your fingers, and you breathe, all of the neurons are turning on in the body. You're bringing vitality and circulation to the whole being. And it's my feeling that that's why that meditation has such a powerful effect on the body's healing capabilities. So that's a meditation we learned 2 nights ago. And if you practice that just 12 minutes a day for 8 weeks, you can expect to see this increase in the length of your telomerase, which translates to the health of your DNA. So this yoga is really powerful, you know. It's the medicine can't do this, you know. And 8 weeks, it's not like it's a lifetime away, you know. Now, excuse me, just a minute. We're going to talk about the brain. We just talked about DNA. We're going to talk about the brain a little bit. So these are the basic components of attention that we experience in life, but that we practice and we heal when we meditate. One, alerting. And alerting is the ability to sustain your vigilance, your focus on an object. Your ability to code that thing that you're focused on and study every aspect of it. Can you keep your mind right on that object? That's called alerting. It means being alert. Two, reorientating. It means switching attentional focus. And that means when the mind becomes distracted, can I switch or shift my mind back to focus on the object of my meditation? Okay? How well we can perform that in meditation, of course, that affects how well we can perform that in real life. That's called reorientating. And then three is executive control. And this means like being an executive or a manager, selectively attending to the things I want to focus on and effectively inhibiting the things that are task irrelevant. And that just means, am I able to keep my eye on the ball? And am I able to not get distracted by other things? This is called executive control. And it's also referred to as top-down control, meaning that the brain is at the command center and not the heart or the other emotions. These three things that I just spoke of, alerting, reorientating, and executive control, they develop in the brain. They take a long time. It takes 20 years. They develop in the brain over the first 20 years of life. The kids, they start developing executive functions in their teenage years, you know. So it takes time. And this little image here just shows you, for those of you who are curious, where these different things are happening in the brain, okay? The green part for orientating is happening here. The alerting, you can see here, and the executive control here in the frontal lobe, right by the pituitary. Now I'm going to talk about the primal brain, the back of the brain stem, the amygdala, which is responsible for dealing with our survival instincts and our base survival instincts. What this is showing us here is this is a graph where they measured the electronic impulses, the electronic signals in this portion of the brain called the amygdala. When we're in danger, right? That's when this part of the brain has to turn on. So these are people that are experiencing panic attacks, severe anxiety attacks, and they measure the signal in the amygdala. Now the black line is the people having the panic attack before they learned meditation. And you'll see that it goes, the electric signals in the amygdala, they fire off a little bit, they go down, and then they shoot up for a sustained period of time really high, right? And then they go here way down baseline when the panic attack's over. Now, after this group learned meditation, the way they responded to the panic attack is shown by this golden line. And you'll notice something interesting, that when the panic attack comes, this is after they've practiced meditation, that there's a huge spike in the electrical signal in the back of the brain. And you think to yourself, well, that's curious. They learn how to meditate. Why is it getting so excited? But what happens is as they start to wake up the amygdala and it becomes hyper alert, now the difference is they're self-aware that this process is happening. So then they catch it. Whoops, I see what's happening to me. And then they use the meditation techniques that they learned, and that brings the signal of the amygdala way down here. See? Down low. It calms it right down, comes up a little bit, and then comes back to baseline. So that's very interesting because this is showing how meditation directly affects the back of the brain and makes it able to be under the practitioner's control. Now I'm just going to read this to you again slowly so that you understand. These are just my notes from my workshop. So sometimes there's some typos. Initial burst shows greater emotional awareness in the post group. So they are aware of their negative ruminating. Ruminating means when you spin on a thought. When you have one thought and you hear a voice in your head over and over and over again, you keep thinking the same thing when you're anxious. You know, you're really worrying about something when you can't sleep at night or something like that. So it says here that the initial burst, it shows a greater emotional awareness in the group that learned how to meditate, showing that they're aware of the anxiety coming and the voices in their head telling them that they should panic. And then it rapidly returns down to baseline. And it was after 2.5 months that these people start to shift their attention automatically. That means it only took 2.5 months for them to practice, that they no longer had to go through this process mechanically. They didn't have to say, oh, okay, I feel a little anxious, let me catch my breath. They no longer had to do that. This starts to happen automatically after only 2.5 months. So I'm really passionate about this because this works, and we don't have to, all of us don't have to be on medication for anxiety. So this is understanding a little bit about how the brain and consciousness perceives itself. There is no region in the brain called the self. The self is made up of all the different systems of the brain. So that means there's different ways to manipulate your view of yourself by manipulating different systems of the brain. These are two basic, common, broad stroke forms of the self. The first one here is the analytical and the narrative self. And this self is very orientated in the past and the future, and thinks about the past and the future continuously. And it also has a fixed concept of themselves, meaning, oh, I'm a school teacher and that's what I am and that's all I'll ever be, or you understand, you're all smart people, a fixed concept of themselves. And then another aspect of this type of self is, like I said before, ruminating or rumination. These kind of people experience the same thoughts spinning repeatedly in their mind. Now, this other kind of self, which they refer to as the experiential self, is a kind of person that is more present in the focused moment. And they're not concerned with the past and they're not concerned with the future, but they're focused in living and vibrating in the moment. And these people have a sense of self that is constantly, continuously fluid, and it's changing. And these people also experience reduced overgeneralized memory, meaning that when they remember things, they remember them very specifically. They don't remember just big, broad stroke memories. Think about that. Memory. When you're unhappy, you remember things in big, broad strokes. You don't remember things specifically. When the depression comes, the specificity goes away. So this is, what else do I got here? So to the extent that a person is fluid and able to be less caught up in the fixed notions of themselves, that person can make associations that are longer and more interesting, and that kind of person can find the relation between two things that are not seen to be relatable. So this kind of person is able to make the connection. Do you understand? You're able to find the relevance in everything. And this is the base of creativity. Um, People with social phobias, um, they had them do some meditation, and what they showed after they practiced meditation, people with social anxiety, that the linguistic processing, the voices in their head, stopped. That metacognitive awareness, parts of the brain that you have to use to maintain the concept of yourself, like the executive functions, became stronger, and their focus on self became less, and their overgeneralized memory went away, and they are starting to be able to remember things more specifically. And this shows what happened when that group started meditating. All of these things went down: the threat stimulus and the self language and the limbic system response to stress, which is blinking of the eyes, looking around, the heart racing, etc. So, yeah, that's the brain. I know it's quite a lot. Why don't you just take 5, and I'll come back and I'll finish up in about 30 minutes. And just take a break, stretch your legs, have a little water or something, and then I'll come right back. And I know it's a lot to take in with our thinking all of this and stuff. So 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Does that sound good? You guys want to take 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah, take 5 minutes. I'll come right back.
Could you scroll up a little bit just to the part that was right above this about social phobia, please? Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, take 5, gang. Have some water, take some notes, and then I'll come back with just maybe 20 more minutes and we'll finish. Cool. Had to get my sweater. It's freezing in here tonight. So, okay. This last part I'll go over with you. So we covered how meditation, or we covered that we can change our DNA through our environment, right? And we do that with our meditation practice. That's why we all feel so good when we finish yoga, because we shut off the external environment for a while. And for just that hour or 2 hours, we dictated the input signal that's going into our senses, which is for 1 hour or 2 hours, this long, deep breath. The breath is telling our body everything's cool. We feel strong. We feel challenged. We overcome those challenges. We chant, you know. We do all of these things that are positive input signals for the human being. So that's how we trigger the proper DNA to express itself, because when it's happy, it's healthy. When it's frustrated and there's tension in the body, that's when the DNA gets distorted and corrupt. And then we discussed how meditation can reduce, well, I just said that, the expression of the cancer DNA, and also for the heart patients, how they increase their survivability rate by stillness of the mind. And then we talked a little bit about the concepts of self, and how social phobias arise out of particular constructs of self that many of us live under. And these are all symptoms of the ego and the subconscious being overloaded. And that's why yoga leads us to this higher construct of self that allows us to be more present and to be more in the moment, and to have a broader, limitless view of what we can become and who we are. Those are all symptoms of meditating, because what we're doing when we're meditating is we're constantly doing that reorientating that we also talked about at the beginning of class. When you perform the mantra and you start to drift away from the mantra and you bring it back into focus, you're strengthening your mind's ability to reorientate. Now we're going to get into how meditation affects gray matter. And we also talked about how meditation affects the anxiety response in the amygdala. But now we're going to talk about the gray matter. And the gray matter is the tissue around the brain. And in the gray matter is where the hardware is to receive all the signals from your sensory input. So all the things you see and you hear and you taste and you touch, all that gets put into the gray matter and processed and by the brain in that gray matter. Now, I'll tell you one thing that's interesting about the gray matter, for those of us that are older, is it shrinks with our age. And here you can see, sorry, I got this thing in front of the screen. Here you can see, it's the red square is the control group. Gray matter shrinks as we get older. And here you can see the red folks are the folks that didn't do any meditating. When they're 25, look, the gray matter is robust. It's around here. And then as you get older, 45, 50, it's down here. But look at this. This is really interesting. People that meditated their whole life, they're 50 years old, they still got the gray matter of somebody who's 25. So what does that mean for your life? You know, if it only requires you just meditate for 12 minutes a day to keep that robust, to keep that thickness up. See, they're measuring the thickness of the gray matter here. As we get older, zoop, it goes down. Okay? But if we practice meditating, see, meditating is just like going to the gym for your brain. If you keep practicing reorientating the mind, if you keep holding that focal point in your mind, if you keep using your imagination, you imagine the visions that we practice when we meditate. All that stuff is what keeps the gray matter intact. And that's what I mean by shape shifting. By shifting the shape of our body, shifting the shape of our gray matter, shifting our DNA, etc. Changes in stress correlates with changes in the gray matter, size of the gray matter in the amygdala. So that means this back part of the brain that we've been talking about, when it's under a lot of stress, it grows, it becomes thicker. So as we get older and we become more scared of life, the front of the brain shrinking and the back of the brain is getting like the Hulk, you know? This is why we have anxiety that we can't turn off, is because the amygdala has grown so big in response to the stresses that it's overpowering the other performances of the brain. Here, the encouraging news, 8 weeks meditation program shows increased gray matter in the left hippocampus. That's a part of our brain that's really important for our sense of self and our sense of being connected and feeling at peace. So 8 weeks meditating, that part of the brain started to grow. Okay? And then the amygdala shows signs decrease of gray matter in the amygdala. Only 8 weeks meditating, and the hippocampus starts to grow, which is good because the stronger that is, the safer we feel, the more compassionate we feel, you know, the more okay and accepting we feel. And the amygdala starts to shrink. And that's cool because that means we don't have to have a heightened state of awareness about every single threat, you know. So here they're showing the gray matter, the thickness in the left hippocampus, its increase after 8 weeks of meditating. So if you think about this, this is really interesting because, you know, those of us who've suffered abuse and trauma, like soldiers, for instance, that are locked in combat for these really long deployments, they've never been deployed this long. They're in combat for 2-3 years. That amygdala grows so huge because they're always kicking down doors, you know. But then what happens is they come home and they're not in that environment anymore. And that amygdala is still so big and the stress response is so alert and so ready that it can't integrate with its new environment. And then, so then that person brings that sense of anxiety and trauma into the house too, and then that can affect the other people in that environment and give them stress. Then their amygdala can grow, you know. So we really are one, you know. When we're around each other, we sync and we become like each other. But that's why, you know, it's good to be around you know, your teachers and holy people and stay in the company of holy people, because then your brain becomes like their brain, you know. It's really so simple. But yeah, so sorry for those of you that really wanted to get a workout tonight. I think I'll stop there. I could talk so long about this stuff. But for those of you journaling, I really wanted to give you a basic concept of what's going on in the background of our practice. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you gained some knowledge, some power from it. And yeah, something on. So I guess I'll let everybody go tonight. And peace. Hey, Joe, thanks for coming, man.